Do you know how terrifying the largest hurricane in the world is? Its destructive power is incredibly alarming, with images that could rival disaster movies. In this video, we will introduce the 3 most intense hurricanes in history. Let's get to know them. First, in third place, we have Hurricane Katrina from 2005. Just a note, because it occurred in 2005, smartphones were not widely used, so the footage captured isn't very high quality. This hurricane was also the deadliest and most damaging in U.S. history. According to records, the losses amounted to approximately $125 billion, or about 1.4 trillion yuan. The area hit hardest was New Orleans, with wind speeds reaching 280 kilometers per hour. Let's take a look at some footage from that time. If you were there, how would you feel? Doesn't it resemble scenes from the apocalypse? Although evacuation notices were issued before the hurricane struck, many people either didn't see them or thought they could stay safe at home. This led to many getting trapped. But being trapped isn't the worst part. The scariest thing is when houses are blown away, leaving the people inside in utter despair. Consider those in cars. If you were evacuating, what would you do? Staying in the car isn't safe, but going outside is even more dangerous. It's terrifying. Fortunately, hurricanes typically only occur in the Atlantic, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, with New Orleans being a notable location. You might be confused by the name New Orleans. Are you thinking of the famous dish, New Orleans chicken? No, it's a city. As you can see, the flooding covered the entire city, with only elevated roads and some high-rise buildings remaining above water. The suburbs fared even worse. During the storm, the waves likely reached the rooftops. Remember the height of that tree. Comparing it to the cars shows just how high the water rose. After just 10 minutes, the flood reached several meters high, and cars were no longer drivable. 10 minutes later, homes were clearly on the verge of collapsing. Swimming to escape was impossible, and even rescue boats struggled to navigate. Let's look at that tree again. The water has nearly reached its top. Can you feel the horror of the flooding? Due to the vast area affected, rescue efforts lagged behind. Tens of thousands were waiting for help, while those who managed to escape were cramped in a small square seeking shelter. With prolonged food shortages and rising temperatures, many couldn't hold on, leading to 1,833 deaths, with injuries numbering in the thousands. Now, let's move on to an even more ferocious hurricane that flattened an area, resembling a true apocalypse. Have you ever seen such devastation caused by a hurricane? This is one of the 3 most powerful hurricane events we're discussing today. Hurricane Maria, which struck Puerto Rico in 2017, the worst natural disaster in its history. Puerto Rico is an island, and this disaster essentially destroyed it. Initially, it faced the impact of tropical waves, which gradually escalated to a tropical storm and then evolved into a hurricane. Notably, hurricanes are classified into 5 categories, and this one reached Category 4, causing widespread power outages. While outages are expected, it's abnormal for around 70,000 households to have been without power for a full year. Officially, the death toll was reported as 64, but many survivors believed it was much higher. Around 240,000 people requested emergency evacuation, but with only 450 shelters accommodating roughly 70,000, many were left to seek refuge in homes or other buildings. Countless houses were blown away, making it hard for survivors to believe only 64 people had died. They estimated at least 30 fatalities. Eventually, under public pressure, officials revised the count to 140. Another puzzling issue is why it took so long, an entire year for power restoration. What do you think the reason might be? Now let's look at the top hurricane that obliterated structures. Do you know how terrifying a top-tier hurricane can be? For instance, Hurricane Dorian struck the Bahamas in 2019, devastating one island completely. The footage shows not a single intact house. This hurricane has been labeled catastrophic. Fortunately, prior to the strongest winds, there were few hazardous elements, apart from some flooding, giving people a chance to evacuate. The hurricane impacted not only the Bahamas but also the U.S., prompting Florida to declare a state of emergency. While no footage of the eye of the storm was captured, we can get a sense of the hurricane's edge. which appeared overwhelmingly terrifying. Reported wind speeds reached 80 meters per second. Can you imagine? The most frightening aspect is that the destruction was not just from the Category 5 hurricane itself, but also from tornadoes spawned by the hurricane. If you saw the scene, what would you want to say? Would you film it for social media? It's hard to imagine what the center of a tornado looks like, but I can feel the fear just watching from my screen. If you feel the same fear, give me a thumbs up. If you're brave like the video recorder, give me a thumbs down to show how many daredevils are out there. Regarding casualties from this hurricane, no detailed reports have emerged. So, what do you think is the most terrifying natural disaster? Alright, I'm from the Science Institute. Follow me for more interesting content.